Let's go to money now. Mary Holm has joined me in studio. Hello there.
Hello, Jesse.
Good topic, this one. We got lots and lots of questions after I mentioned it just after 1 o'clock. Kiwisaver for people heading into retirement and just after you retire.
Yeah, look, any Kiwisaver topic, we get lots of questions. But I would quite like to say right up front that a lot of what I say will apply to younger people in Kiwisaver as well, because it's sort of, a lot of it's just sort of basic
Kiwisaver 101.
Yeah, yes, a lot of it. And also to people who aren't in Kiwisaver, I mean, perhaps retired people who didn't get into Kiwisaver, perhaps because they were too old when it started or they are not in. A lot of this is kind of more general investing principles as well. So I just don't want everyone to turn, to go somewhere else because they're not specifically...
Turn onto the rock until 2:45.
Yeah, we can't have that.
Okay.
No.
Fair enough, yeah. Okay, remind us what happens at retirement.
Well, at retirement, because I think you've got a question from a listener about that. Do you want to read? Oh, haven't you got that there?
Is it the one about the husband 10 years
yes,
older? Yes. Sorry.
That's right.
Jesse, Mary, my husband is 10 years older than me, and Anne wants to know, do I have to wait until I'm 65 and until he's 75 until I can get my Kiwisaver out? So presumably at the moment he's 65 and she's 55, do you think?
Yeah, or
somewhere between the two.
That's right. Yes, we don't know. And the answer is yes, she does have to wait. You can't sort of ride in on... I mean, otherwise it could get ridiculous when you think about it. You could have someone turning 65 with a 20-year-old partner who suddenly gets
People would be marrying 65-year-olds just for the Kiwisaver benefits.
That's right. Yeah, it could get very dangerous. And what Anne should keep in mind is that she might live for another 40 years after she turns 65. So it's really, the idea is for the money to be for her retirement. New Zealand's very good at treating people financially as individuals. We don't lump everyone's tax together and tax people as married couples, which they do, for example, in America, and that leads to all kinds of complications like not getting married specifically because it will hurt your tax situation. And
we should do that as a topic at some point.
Yeah, we should, yes.
Options when you get married or get into a relationship about how to structure your finances.
Yes, we should, shouldn't we? Yeah. I do know that when I lived in America, my husband and I paid $4,000 more a year because we were married, and that would probably be about $25,000 now. It was a long time ago. It was big money. Unfortunately, we were already married when we got there, but we had quite a few friends who didn't marry for that specific reason.
Yeah,
but
that's interesting.
it's a whole other topic.
Okay.
But so what happens to Anne when she gets to 65 at retirement with Kiwisaver? Usually, and we'll get to the unusual circumstances in a minute, but for most people, the tax credits stop when they turn 65. And in the year they turn 65, their tax credit's actually proportionate to the amount of the year that they're under 65. So if they turn 60, the Kiwisaver year goes from July 1 to June 30. So if they turn 65 halfway through the year, then they get a tax credit of half the usual amount, and they calculate it out for you. You don't have to worry about that. That just, the government IRD takes care of that. So the tax credits stop and compulsory employer contributions stop, but employers can and quite often do continue to contribute. Nudge your employer along if that's you and say to them, hey, I've heard... Mary says lots of employers continue because
they're not going to do worse off, are they? I mean, they're worse off than if they stop doing it, but they're no worse than the previous year.
That's right. That's right, and it's a nice thing to do for people.
Norm was sorry. You finished on that point yet?
Just one more thing about what happens at 65 is I suggest you don't close down your Kiwisaver. You can at that point. You can close the whole thing down and take all the money out. But there are a couple of reasons to keep it open. Even if you take most of the money out, you could take most of it out but leave $5 in, or perhaps you better ask your provider. They might say it's got to be 50 or something, but leave a little amount in, I would suggest to everybody, because for one thing, compared with similar investments that aren't in Kiwisaver, the fees are usually lower.
That's right, yeah.
In Kiwisaver. And quite apart from that, a lot of people in Kiwisaver, they've never had managed fund investment before. Kiwisavers are managed funds, and they just wouldn't know how to get into another similar investment outside Kiwisaver, although most of the providers offer them. But it's quite a good vehicle for people to be in retirement anyway.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest don't close it down. Keep your options open. Yeah.
Norm was one of the people who got in touch. He's 64 and he wants to know whether it's worth joining Kiwisaver at this stage.
Yeah, no, that feeds right into what I was going to say next, which is definitely, Norm, you must. In fact, any younger listeners out there, sometimes I say to them, nudge your parents about this. If you know anyone who's around 60 or between 60 and 65 roughly, who's not in Kiwisaver, tell them they're really silly not to join at that stage. Earlier when I said usually the tax credits stop, they don't stop if you haven't been in Kiwisaver for 5 years. So everybody, regardless of their age, gets 5 years of tax credits and 5 years of compulsory employer contributions. So if you join at 64, you'll get that until you're 69. And so everyone gets at least 5 years. You also can't withdraw your money. You've got to tie it up for those 5 years too. So if you start at 64, through till 69, you get the tax credits, employer contributions if you're an employee, and you can't take your money out.
Okay.
So you're treated like a younger person. Well, it's one way to feel a bit younger in your retirement years. But if the point about joining is that if you're employed, obviously you're going to get some contributions from your employer as well as the government. That's just money that it'd be real pity not to have. If you're not employed, you can still get into Kiwisaver, of course, and if you contribute $1,043 a year, which is $20 a week, you can do it in monthly sums of $87 it is a month. And if you put that in for 5 years, so you're putting in roughly 5 times $1,000 for 5 years, and the government is putting in $2,600 over 5 years for you. And so why on earth would you turn away that money from the government? Some people say, well, I don't need it, I'm rich enough, and I say, well, just get it anyway and give it to charity. It's your way of directing some of the government's money the way you would like it to be. So you just want to get in there and make the most of that opportunity.
People might get a bit cross with you for saying that, Mary, taking money off the government if you don't need it. Wouldn't you leave it with the government and
it's a good
get it
point.
to the general fund?
It's
Or save the taxpayer?
But maybe that's an ethical question, isn't it? I mean, in some ways I admire people who say I don't need Kiwisaver and therefore I'm not in it. But judging from a perfectly selfish point of view, it's quite nice to say, well, I don't like... Everyone's got some gripes about how the government spends its money. So here's a way to... Because you can still give it to what the government would have given it to anyway. give it to the local childcare centre or something.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I heard from one person about where to put her money. She was in a conservative fund. In fact, she's 68 and her money is in a conservative Kiwisaver fund, and she wants to know whether she's best to invest it somewhere else, who with and where. Should she try and keep contributing? And I know you were going to talk to us about what type of Kiwisaver fund is best at this age.
Yes, yeah. It's basically, to start with, I think that at any age at all, before retirement, you might as well have your money in only one Kiwisaver fund, although you can have it in more than one. You've got to be with one provider only, but you can be in more than one fund with that provider. And there is a counter-argument that says that you might learn a bit more about the markets if you put some of your money, say, in a conservative fund and some of it in a growth fund, and you can sort of watch over the years how the growth fund will go up and down more, but will probably grow faster. So if you want to do that for a sort of learning mechanism, you could do that. But generally speaking, for most people before retirement, you might as well have it all in the one fund. But at retirement, and this also applies to other savings, not just Kiwisaver. So you hit retirement, a lot of people get to retirement, they've got a certain amount of Kiwisaver money. They've often also got bank term deposits and other savings like that. And I would say here's what you should do. You've got to retirement, you've got a lump sum of money in Kiwisaver and possibly elsewhere. First of all, pay off any high interest debts. You should be doing that anyway all the time. Credit card debts, any other high interest debts, you've got to get rid of them. They're horrible. And then pay off any mortgages. If you've got a mortgage at retirement, you really are best to get that paid down as much as possible. If you've done all of that, paid off debts and got rid of the mortgages, then you can start doing other things with your savings. A lot of people, when they very first retire, like to spend a bit of their retirement savings on sort of setting themselves up. They might get a new car or a new car to them. They might repair the roof. They might they sort of want to just get things all hunky-dory so that they aren't likely to be any big expenses for the next 10 years or so, something like that. So it's quite a good idea to do that too, I think. And then once you've got money left over after that, so you've got some savings that you're hoping to spend during retirement, I would put some in a Kiwisaver cash fund or else bank term deposits, which are pretty similar actually. But the cash fund, the advantage of the cash fund is you're not tying the money up for particular periods. You can get it out whenever you need to. And I would put enough in there to be spending over the next 2 or 3 years. The sort of amount of money you think you're going to spend in the next 2 or 3 years can be in a Kiwisaver cash fund.
A cash fund is a conservative fund?
Conservative, yes, good point. Conservative, or they're actually on the Kiwisaver Fund Finder and the sorted website, which I recommend people use. They call it, there's conservative and then there's a word for even less aggressive. Defensive, it's called.
Defensive.
Yeah, yes, which is the very lowest risk fund. So beyond that, money that you expect to spend in, say, the next 3 to 10 years, so you want to look at your lump sum and say, this much I think I'll spend in the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, this much I think I'll be spending in the next, say, 3 to 10 years. Good idea to put that in a balanced fund, because then you're going to get a bit more growth on it. But you don't want it too risky because you're getting quite close to when the time you're going to spend it. And then the rest could go into a growth fund or even an aggressive fund, which is even more high-powered. It's purely shares and property really at that point, if you've got the courage to watch that balance going up and down. So at retirement, you might have money in 3 different Kiwisaver funds with one provider.
And the point is that you don't need all the money at 65. You need some of that money at 75.
Yes, and some at 95, hopefully.
Yeah.
So
you could enact that strategy at 60, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. Yes, you could. And in fact, some people move all their money as they're going through Kiwisaver to, say, a conservative fund by the time they're 60. If you are a conservative person, that's not a bad idea. But it's not a great idea because it'd be quite good to leave some of it in a growth fund, but assuming you're going to be living at least 10 more years. That might all sound a bit complicated. Some people might find it too complicated. And if you don't like risk and you want to keep it simple, just put the whole lot in a conservative or even a defensive fund, the very lowest risk.
Yeah, and if it sounds good but you didn't quite catch it all, you can always go, well, you can listen back online, of course, but you can go to Mary's website, maryholm.com, and you've written about this.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to see it in writing.
That's right, yes. There's plenty on the website about it. And then obviously, so you've set it up with the money you're planning to spend shortly in the low risk, middle term money in the medium risk, higher risk money for the long term. Every year or two you want to be moving some down from the, so that you've still got the couple of years ahead of you in the cash fund and etc. So you want to move some money down from high risk to medium and some from medium to low.
Doesn't cost anything to bump it around like that?
No, not within Kiwisaver. I don't think any of the providers charge. If your provider did charge, look to going to another provider. Have a look on the Kiwisaver Fund Finder and find another provider. I don't think any of them charge for that.
And another reason why it's good to do that through Kiwisaver rather than having, say, a third of your money in shares and a third in property and a third in term deposits is that you can have transaction costs if you're trying to manage those.
That's a good point.
Movements yourself,
Yes, if you keep it within Kiwisaver, it's pretty good on those sort of costs.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Let me share a plan with you that someone sent through. They want your approval, Mary.
Yeah.
Don't we all? Now, because I don't turn 65 until February 2020, since August last year, we've been living off my husband's New Zealand super, interest from savings, and a small rental income property. We are not big spenders, so we cope, although the current low interest rates are going to seriously reduce our income soon. I've been a Kiwisaver since inception, and while we had our business, we managed to save around $60,000, and at present it's 50-50 in growth and conservative funds. Sounds good so far. Now, I'm only saving $90 per month, so I can qualify for the government top-up. Also, something we learned to do from Mary.
Yeah.
What I propose to do over the next 4 years is to put lump sums from term deposits as they come due for renewal into my Kiwisaver, as they seem to get far better returns than I can manage to find. When I turn 65, I gather that the provider will then be able to feed back monthly sums at the same time as growing the remaining balance. What do you think?
Broadly, I think, now this is from Jan, and I think she's got things pretty right for the most part. I'm glad that she's contributing $90 a month because she's not yet 65, and so she's going to get the tax credit. That's excellent. What I worry about a bit is that she says she's getting better returns in Kiwisaver than her term deposits, and that's why she wants to move her money from the term deposits into Kiwisaver. Whenever anyone gets better returns on any investment than another, you've got to always look at why, and the short answer will always be that it's riskier. If you get higher returns from a finance company than a bank, that's because it's riskier, etc., etc. So she's in a conservative Kiwisaver fund, I think she said, didn't she?
She's split between conservative and
that's
growth.
Right, she is, yes. So she's getting better returns than her term deposits, but that's because even in a conservative fund, there are quite a lot of investments in bonds, and often some in a fairly small amount in shares as well. On the Kiwisaver Fund Finder, I highly recommend everyone goes on that and looks at the check your current fund, scroll down and you'll see what sorts of investments your fund is in, and so you're aware of that. So that is riskier. Being in a fund that includes some bonds, the shares are obviously riskier, but even the bonds, in fact, in the current environment, it's quite possible people's bond balances will fall in the future, in the near future. I should go into that in another session, actually, but it is riskier, in short. And so she's putting money from term deposits into riskier funds. I would suggest she sets up her savings, as I said before. The money she's planning to spend after retirement in the first couple of years should be kept in bank term deposits or in a Kiwisaver defensive fund, which won't have the bonds in it. A couple of other points. She talks about her provider giving her regular amounts each month after she turns 65. I think that probably every provider offers that. Certainly nearly all of them do. And so that's something you can set up with your provider and ask them to take the money out of your cash fund or your low risk fund and put it into your bank account monthly. Some of them might even do it more often than monthly. I mean, your New Zealand Super's coming in fortnightly. You might want to set it up so it comes on in the week that the super doesn't come in or something like that. Talk to your provider about that so you've got a regular weekly amount coming in. The other point I just wanted to make to Jan is that they've got a rental property and she's talking about living off, to some extent, off the rent coming in. In retirement, it's not always a good idea to keep hold of that rental property because the capital, the value of the house, you're not able to spend. You know, there's a strong argument to be said for selling it and perhaps putting the money into shares or something less risky so that you can eat into the capital as well. And the other point is that, you know, especially as you get older, you won't have worries about tenants and whether there's a P-lab there and whether, you know, all the ghastly things that people just don't pay. Got to take them to the disputes tribunal, tenants tribunal. I'm not necessarily on the landlord side here, but I'm just saying that a lot of people might want to consider selling a rental property once they get to retirement stage for those reasons.
I recall as you were talking that you've got quite a nifty sort of formula for working out how much of your savings to get out each year in retirement, and I might send people back to the website unless you can explain it.
I could very quickly say it.
Go on.
If you, let's say you're 65, and you want to spend your savings until you're 85, and you're happy to think that if you're still alive, then you'll be happy on New Zealand Super only, because a lot of people are at that stage of their lives. So the very simple way to do it is to divide your money by 20. You've got 20 years from 65 to 85. let's say you've got $100,000 in savings, divide it by 20 and spend $5,000 a year. And as you're eating into the money, you're still, the rest of the money, the balance there is earning returns on it, interest or dividends or whatever, which will help to keep pace with inflation. So it's a very rough rule, but it's not a bad rule. It actually can work quite well.
Yeah. So the first year you get out 1/20th of it, which is 5,000, but the next year you don't get out 5,000 and you get out 1/19th of it, right?
That's right. Next year 1/19th,
which
next
might be
year 1/18th.
might be more than 5,000.
Yes, that's right. Especially if it's growing a bit. You've taken money out, but hopefully returns have kept pace with that.
Okay. Natalie says, Mary, I'll be 65 in 3 weeks, so your topic today is timely for me.
Yes.
I joined Kiwisaver in its first year, and although I haven't worked for a few years, I've continued to contribute, depositing $1,000 each year in June. She's good, isn't she?
Yes. Excellent.
My money is in the conservative fund. Here comes the hard part. I check it fairly regularly these days, and for the last 3 months, the balance has dropped each month.
Yes.
As I will have the choice shortly of withdrawing the money and investing it elsewhere, I'd value your advice on should I stay or should I go now?
Yeah, it's as I said before, if whatever else you do, leave a few dollars in there just to keep your foot in the door. It will have gone down probably because the bonds in the fund have probably gone down. Maybe even next week or next fortnight, a fortnight from now, I should talk about bonds and how in a fund that holds bonds you can lose value. And that might continue to happen. So if she's really feeling nervous about that, she's got a couple of options. One is to move into a defensive fund, which is cash only, basically, which is like, or just moving it out into bank term deposits. But it won't necessarily keep going down. We just don't know.
Steve asks, Mary, if I die, does my Kiwisaver go to my estate or is it lost?
Oh, yeah, it goes to your estate. Yeah, same as everything else, yes.
Okay. I'm getting so many good ones through. What shall I share with you? Give me a second here.
Sure.
Okay, I was born in 1948 and became part of the National Provident Fund in 1967. I continued to pay funds in my career from 1977 to 2015. I didn't join Kiwisaver in 2006. I've never gambled, never alcohol or tobacco. I've saved money. I've owned my own home. And in 2006, I knew that I'd get the NPF money and superannuation on retirement, so I didn't take up Kiwisaver. I'm aware that I may have missed out on the $1,000 government top-up at the beginning. Have I otherwise lost out greatly by retiring on 2 forms of income rather than 3?
I don't want to say he's lost. He or she?
Yes, Richard.
Richard. I don't want to say he's lost it too much because it'll just make him feel sad. But he has lost out the $1,000 kickstart and some tax credits over the years, which would amount to a few $1,000s. Yeah, he's missed out on maybe $8,000 or so from the government. And, given he was in the National Provident Fund, Richard, you might feel better about that. That was a very generous fund and you've done nicely. That was nicely out of that one. So overall, you're okay. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one from Trevor. As a recent retiree, one thing that was not well understood by me prior to my retirement is the cost of things that I couldn't do when I worked. These cost money, which needs to be factored into required retirement funds requirements. Retirees, if they are active in their early years of retirement, can spend lots more than when they were working.
Yeah.
And the retirement calculators do not promote this conundrum, which in my view is an essential part of retirement planning that is seldom recognised.
It's interesting that. I've had some angry letters from listeners when I've said people spend less in retirement. I think certainly in the first few years of retirement, especially if you're pretty healthy, you can possibly spend more in total. Don't forget you're not spending money on commuting and, work clothes, and there's quite a few savings people make. And you're also not needing to put money aside to save it anymore, typically. So on balance, but there are certainly, and it's probably a good sign if you're in your late 60s, say, and spending more than when you were working. It means you're out there living life to the full. So go for it. But typically people by the time they're 85 or 90 say it's hugely different by then.
Someone asks, Mary, when you compare a conservative Kiwisaver fund to a term deposit, do you take into account that there are fees on Kiwisavers and not on a term deposit?
That's a good point. There are fees, yes. And some people say, well, term deposits, there aren't any fees, but in fact, the bank just gives you a bit lower interest than it would otherwise give you if there were fees. So it's a bit hard to work that out. But be aware that a conservative Kiwisaver account, as opposed to a defensive one, which is defined on the Kiwisaver Fund Finder as one that's very low risk, the conservative one does include bonds and often some shares and so on as well. It takes more to manage, but in the long run, you should be making higher returns.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to test you with a hard one to finish, Mary. Ian says, I'm 67. I've been in Kiwisaver at least 6 years. Can I still apply for the first-time loan? Told you it was going to be a hard one.
Yeah. So how many years has he been in?
6 years.
So he's only 67.
Yeah.
So he's no longer, if he'd been in for less than 5 years, he probably could. He's no longer a sort of ordinary Kiwi. He's a retired Kiwisaver.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're allowed to not know sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's...
Good on him, by the way.
Yes.
Looking for a first time at 67.
Yes, go for it. Go on the website and got and Google the it's a Housing New Zealand website. It's got information about that. They'd be ageist possibly to not let him.
Right. Mary Holm, great to have you, and thank you for your advice as always.
It's a pleasure, Jessie.
And Mary will be back in 2 weeks' time.